Stacy, you were talking a minute ago about you went in depth and rewatched all the testimony. Do you mind repeating all that?
Yes. So what I noticed when I was really watching this critically is just how amazing the stories were. There were 21 people who testified on this bill, and they were from
In
all
favor.
in favor of this bill. And these were victims, these were representatives, these were former representatives. I testified as a city councilor, lawyers testified, and everyone had their own personal stories, their own personal reasons for supporting this. And I thought that was really powerful. And just even watching it again, I was like, oh, I'm picking up even more. And it made me even angrier, because I didn't, I was in the room. Even being in the room behind the people testifying, it didn't really fully sink in, just how important that bill as it was written should have been. But then I compared that to the 6 people who testified opposing HB 1675. 5 of them were current reps, and they really had no personal connection to the coalition. They had no personal stories, other than one who said her daughter felt reassured. And there was one former rep who testified, and I looked at their call to action to the general public, where Lynn Shalette, the executive director, had said, oh, they would have had 1,000 people in the room. That's not true. Their Facebook post told people, take 2 minutes out of your day and speak about these things. They did not post the actual bill, because if you look at people's testimony who opposed HB 1675, they don't make sense. It's
They
like
just repeat those 3 bullet
those
points in the call to
3 bullet
action
points.
over and over again.
Exactly. So this was not.
Will come to order. Members, take your seats.
There it is. Okay, so let's go around. Everybody introduce themselves. We got a great panel today. We have Representative Ellen Reed, Stacey Brown, and Claire Best. Say hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
So, also known as the Agents of Chaos. Stacey, why don't you let the audience in on the backstory behind that that moniker?
Yes. So I'm a city councilor in Concord, New Hampshire, and also on city council is a councilor at large, Amanda Grady Sexton, who is the lobbyist for the coalition. And in January, I raised concerns about her conflict of interest as a city councilor making decisions. And I was really surprised by the outrage, by just raising that I had a concern. There was a conflict of interest, and the mayor and other councilors, they called me an agent of chaos for raising that, and I actually kind of like that, because I kind of like it because I've discovered that the city is acting inappropriately regarding public funds. So if I am disrupting illegal acts, and for that they're calling me an agent of chaos, then I'll own it.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
And let's go to Representative Reed, and let's talk about our common denominator, which is HB 1675. So let's go ahead and talk. Take the mic. Take the mic.
So I am New Hampshire State Representative Ellen Reed. I have been in office for 10 years. I am a far leftist. I don't think I would be challenged for the title of the furthest left in the House, an outspoken Democratic Socialist, founder of the Progressive Caucus, who is now not far enough left for my taste. And I put in, because I was a survivor, I was a victim of sexual assault, and I ran into the system, the monopoly that is there meant to help survivors, and realized not just how much it failed survivors, but also how it was structurally not meant for survivors, but built for the people who run it to enrich themselves. And after a couple of years of delving further and getting more information and getting confirmed in what was really going on, with the help of some of the people here right now and others, I put in HB 1675. which called for an investigation onto the coalition. Investigation just being a legislative investigation, it's not a criminal investigation, but just finding information because most of their money comes from state and federal funds. And when I say most, 98%, which is pretty much more than any other government contractor or nonprofit that the government works with in the state. It also called for an audit, yearly audits, and it also called to have them temporarily removed from their statutory commissions pending the results of the investigation. All in all, it should have been fairly not controversial, but so that's my background.
And the
Agent of
notorious,
Chaos.
the notorious Claire Best,
Hi, thank you, Gracie.
the senior member of the Agents of Chaos.
Yes. So my name is Claire Best. I'm a film and television agent, and I'm a part-time resident in New Hampshire. My family are taxpayers in New Hampshire, but I have been dismissed by the coalition as being an outside influence from California. Which I find quite bizarre because the coalition, I don't get paid for anything that I have said, anything I do say. I don't pay anyone for it. And yet the coalition has taken a lot of money, several $100,000 from a California billionaire called Henry T. Nichols III, who appears in the Epstein files 430 times, has a disgusting history of sex abuse, drug trafficking, domestic violence, smearing feces on his girlfriend's face, hiding underground sex layers. And for some reason, there's a different set of standards for a male sex and drug predator from California who comes armed with billions of dollars to pay the right representatives off in New Hampshire and the coalition versus me, a New Hampshire, part-time resident property owner in New Hampshire, who comes with legitimate concerns and is myself a victim of cyberstalking by the coalition.
So when you say cyber stalking, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, I can. So in 2020,
Yeah.
after the George Floyd murder, Governor Chris Sununu called for a law enforcement accountability commission, and he invited members of the public to write in with regard to their concerns about law enforcement in New Hampshire.
Mhm.
So I wrote, using my New Hampshire address and my name, an email to that commission, citing my concerns about the coercion of minors in sexual assault investigations, and I named three criminal cases: New Hampshire versus Forward Afshar, which was eventually overturned, New Hampshire versus Griffin Furlert, which involved two teenagers, or actually three or four teenagers, and then New Hampshire versus Owen Labrie, which is the original case that I became interested in because my husband went to St. Paul's School, and I couldn't understand the sensationalism behind that case. No sooner had I written in than Amanda Grady Sexton, the Director of Public Affairs for the Coalition, and the Coalition's social media handle itself, started to follow my social media handle. And then another social media handle that I am 99% sure is fed and handled by them, called Let's Hear the REA1, started to follow me, 83 of my clients, and then that handle posted my letter to the LEACT Commission online, doxing me, doxing my family, making statements about me that were untrue. They, mixed me up with somebody who'd given a lot of money to St. Paul's School and a monument. They posted a picture of this monument. And I became really alarmed. So I wrote to the LEACT Commission about this, asking about their integrity, that they asked members of the public to write in. And this is what happened to me. And so the following year, in 2021, I received a threat of a defamation suit from Shaheen and Gordon, who is one of the law firms that represent the coalition. basically, with my personal information, with everything, threatening me that if I didn't retract some of the statements that I had made about the coalition, and Amanda Grady Sexton, Councillor Amanda Grady Sexton, that, they would sue me for defamation, etc., etc. I had a First Amendment attorney who reminded them of my First Amendment rights and that my statements weren't defamation if they were true. And some of my statements included that I thought that the coalition was a money laundering front, that the coalition, subjected teenagers and youth to horrific environments. And I'm trying to think what else. Anyway, and that they were involved in a, kids for cash type scheme. And what happened is the Shaheen and Gordon attorney basically said that he would slow walk the lawsuit if I withdrew these comments because Amanda Grady Sexton was worried about her reputation because she was running for re-election as councillor for the Council of Concord. So we agreed to remove the statements, but keeping my rights intact. And in return, we asked for this Let's Hear the REA1 Twitter handle to be taken down, and it was taken down, which leads me to assume that it was Amanda Grady Sexton who was running it.
So let's hear the Twitter handle.
Let's say the REA1
Yeah.
is the one that they took down. Let's talk about Let's Hear the True for a moment. So Let's Hear the True does belong to me.
That's your Twitter handle.
Well, yes, but let's just go into this because it's a privacy issue, and it's a very important privacy issue. So in 2019, in July 2019, Amanda Grady Sexton and the coalition used a social media and phone campaign and media campaign to block ABC Good Morning America from airing an interview, a program with Owen Labrie when he got out of jail. And for 5 or 6 years, they had supported narratives describing him as an Al-Qaeda terrorist, as a convicted rapist, etc., etc.
Wait, Owen Labrie as a convicted, or I'm sorry, as a terrorist? Like, how do they reach that conclusion?
So there's a book called I Have the Right To, and you can find it ihavetherighttobook.com, which is written by Jennifer Abelson, who is a Boston Globe reporter, and Chessie Prout, who was the victim complainant in New Hampshire versus Owen Labrie.
Yep.
And that book has an introduction by Congresswoman Ann Custer, and it largely covers New Hampshire versus Owen Labrie and St. Paul's School and a selective part of the discovery in that student identity, student emails, etc., in a private school. So this book describes or equates Owen Labrie to literally an Al-Qaeda terrorist and Donald Trump. While this book, and it was criticized in reviews on Amazon, on Amazon.com where you can buy it. It was criticized for being overly political, etc. But nevertheless, this book was heavily promoted by the coalition, promoted by Ann Custer, and was a very one-sided propaganda account that exposed the identities of students in a private school, which I had a problem with because Governor Hassan in 2015 signed a bill to protect student privacy, data privacy in schools. So anyway, when the coalition shut down this program in 2019, I created an anonymous Twitter account called Let's Hear the True, and I started to speak up. And I said under that account, I'm keeping my identity private because too many people have been harmed in this case. And that privacy was violated by Amanda Grady Sexton, who is a public official. There is Article, I think it's Article 1(2)(b), I think it's called, which protects the privacy of citizens And I feel that my privacy was invaded by public officials due to that and continues to be.
Just to be clear, you said the book also said that Owen Labrie was a convicted rapist, but he was not convicted of rape. Is that correct?
You are correct. The book, I don't think, said he was a convicted rapist, but Amanda Grady Sexton of the Coalition said he was a convicted rapist in the Concord Monitor and in social media. No, he was acquitted of felony rape. He was found guilty of misdemeanor sexual assault, which in 2014, when this incident happened, wasn't even reportable. But he was found guilty of a computer felony for soliciting a minor for sex. So it's basically the jury. The jury didn't believe her. They didn't believe him. The jury, he said they didn't have sex. She said they did have sex, and she said it wasn't consensual. The jury believed neither of them, said they did have sex, but it was consensual under the Romeo and Juliet laws of two people within 3 years of each other. But the invitation for this was a felony because it was conducted on computer, and New Hampshire has not updated its computer statutes to be in line with modern communication methods between teenagers.
So look, can I just ask you, Claire, that that law, the computer crime that he was accused of, the felony, which I think he now has to register as a sex offender because he was accused of that. That was created because a 41-year-old man used a computer and maybe MySpace or something to lure a 13-year-old girl.
Correct.
That was the whole reason of that for that law, and it was applied to.
Correctly. And ironically, it was not. And in fact, in 2018, I think it was Representative Jack Flanagan who introduced a bill that would have decriminalized computer communications between teenagers, specifically because of this case. But the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence lobbied heavily against it, and so it never, got killed. Just as they lobbied heavily against 1675. And what people don't know is that the sex offender registry list brings in federal dollars to New Hampshire. So since between 2014 and 2021, under the Adam Walsh Sex Offender Registry Act, it was over $900,000. And I found documentation from the coalition that that basically states that they are involved in the management of the sex offender registry.
Wow.
So I think
they truly control everything.
Yeah, they are a complete monopoly on all things related to sexual and domestic violence in the state. So if you're a victim in this state of either sexual assault or domestic violence, there is not a single person you can go to for support other than your personal friends that is not connected. No advocate, no nurse, no hotline.
Yeah.
They are all part of this umbrella organization of the coalition. That's pretty much the structure across all the coalitions of all the states. And it's problematic because they are receiving public funds to do public function. But whereas if a government agency were to do those functions with those public funds like normal, that would be covered under all of our normal transparency, all of our normal accountability. We've outsourced these public funds to do these public jobs to a black box that has no transparency and no accountability and none of the constitutional requirements that our state departments would have in terms of equal protection under the law and serving all residents. So what did we expect would happen when you combine millions and millions of dollars of federal funding with zero oversight? You end up with problems like this, which is exactly why we see the Florida Coalition getting convicted of abusing federal funds, why we see the California Coalition getting in trouble for abuse of federal funds. Oklahoma Coalition, I believe, is the one that had to be disbanded entirely. Tennessee Coalition had to be restructured. And there are a few others that got in trouble all within the last 5 or so years, all because of the abuse of federal funds and all of this secrecy and lack of accountability and lack of transparency. So it's really not even a surprise. It shouldn't even be shocking that this is happening in New Hampshire as well.
It's interesting you say that because like I had my own domestic violence situation. I went to Amanda Grady Sexton, and because I am friends with Claire, I wasn't going to get help, and I didn't get anything. Go on.
Gracie, that seems weird. Like, can you tell that story? Because like, would the average person go to Amanda? How did you get connected to Amanda Grady Sexton? What was that?
I was back home in Los Angeles with my son, and I fled New Hampshire to get away from a domestic violence situation. And I was ordered back by the state of New Hampshire because if I kept Adam any longer, apparently it would have been kidnapping or something like that. So I had to return Adam back. Um, so when I got the news, I was horrified. I didn't want to go back. I wanted to be home where my family was, my support group. And I had sent a very desperate tweet to Adam Sexton, Amanda Grady Sexton, and other people like Hassan and Shaheen, asking them for help because I'm escaping a situation that was not healthy and I needed to get the hell out of there. Well, we were talking, Amanda and I were talking, and she asked me if I knew Claire. Yes, I do. I am very friendly with Claire. And she basically said, give up Claire, and then we can help you, is what was said.
Wow.
And I didn't take it seriously, so I said no. Like, besides, what are we, 12? Like, you're going to tell me who to be friends with? I can't be friends with Ellen Reed.
It's like a doctor saying, right. It's like a doctor will not treat you if, based on who your friends are.
Well, it's worse because doctors are private actors as well, right? It's like the DOJ saying, give up your friend or we're not going to prosecute the guy that raped you. And that would be, you could go after the government full force for that kind of thing. But because even though public funds, 98% public funds, and even though they're doing government function with those funds, they don't have that accountability. There's no law requiring that they give you or anybody else equal treatment. They can screw you over if they don't like you personally. And it's not only your story, Gracie. We had so many victims say how they screwed them over, not just neglected them, but actively screwed them over.
Yes,
because there was interpersonal right out of this like mean girl interpersonal stuff. And I have my own story of how they came after me being a victim when I was trying to help other victims not go through what I went through, which was the denial of a rape kit I was entitled to, and coming after me on every single thing I put in these mean girl kind of ways. And so, this kind of vengeance, this retribution that they've shown is exactly why we've had a hard time getting more people to become public, because I've been reached out to, Claire's been reached out to by literally dozens of victims, police officers, in some cases, police chiefs, people who used to manage at some of the crisis centers, right? All these people have said, yeah, this is what I went through. Oh my God, thank you for putting this in.
Well, it was interesting.
And then say, I can't be public because they're going to come after me. They already came after me too much. And it's this kind of like bullying tactic. It really feels like high school on steroids.
Well, not only that, but when I came back to New Hampshire, I could not get an attorney. I was calling people left and right down the line of attorneys I can get. And everybody kept saying conflict of interest, click, click.
Meaning that they worked for the coalition, therefore they could not take your case.
And by like the 9th call, I asked them, does this have to do with Amanda Grady Sexton? I got a click.
Wow.
And just to connect those dots, because I'm, not sure if we made this clear, but Amanda Grady Sexton is the public affairs director who is very well politically connected to the Shaheens and everyone else. Her husband is Adam Sexton, the political director of the largest news station and certainly the most politically focused news station in the state. And she's also on the Concord City Council with
Mhm.
Stacy. So this same person, it really starts to feel like the mafia, right? It's very incestuous.
No, not only that, but that's where all our stories start to intersect, just so the audience kind of gets chimed in
Yeah.
on this, that everybody from like different backgrounds, different political beliefs come together and we've become a research team. And this all came from like us getting individually screwed over by the coalition. You
Yeah.
know?
Right. And Amanda, so after
Yes.
in January, when I said there's a conflict of interest, and her organization trains police officers, and Concord PD or law enforcement train their people. And I raised that. And I also pointed out that she's the chair of the public safety board and wasn't having any meetings. And I thought that was really weird. And it was when she was lobbying for Marsy's Law, for this billionaire who happens to be domestic and sexual violent predator anyways. So I raised that, and I pointed out, she's not holding meetings. And she had there was one meeting when there wasn't even a quorum, another meeting the next year that she didn't even attend. And shortly after that, and then I had blow up at council, and I was being accused for being aggressive. And then just recently I had the mayor send me a letter of admonishment saying they wanted to remove me from council. And it's like,
Agent of chaos.
right, agent of chaos.
But
Well,
can
and
I
I think
just
I
go ahead.
think that the timing of the letter, Stacey, is most interesting because Stacey
Very.
said she got the letter on Tuesday this week, I think it was.
Tuesday, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
And
there was
on Monday, we had a council meeting. And during the council meeting, the finance director admitted that they had not been following the laws regarding our capital reserve funds. And I was like, that should be the story. But instead, I get a letter less than 24 hours later that the mayor happened to send to 3 other news organizations. So they're calling me, and that became the story, this letter of admonishment. I'm like, oh, this seems like something a public affairs director would do. And also at the same time at the House, it was the amendment, right? It was the decision on the amendment for HB 1675 was happening.
The floor vote,
Yes.
which was very narrowly tabled by a very narrow margin, meaning that had it been a clean vote when that table motion was made, had it been just a clean vote on the bill, we most likely would have won that vote. There were enough people, even amongst the Democrats, who have been organized against any kind of coalition transparency. But so it makes a lot of sense.
Men who voted.
What's that?
Let's talk about the Democratic, socialist, feminist, forward-thinking.
Oh, all these super
Democrats
wonderful progressive men. You're
that
right.
voted against the
Well,
bill.
if I
Let's
can
talk about
just, if I can just rewind back to the point of a public affairs director
Mhm.
doing this, kind of maneuvering to make sure that the coverage was about Stacy being admonished instead of Stacy being the one that uncovered $1 million of wasted city funds, which was really what happened.
Damn
But
you for
being
being good at your
punished about
job,
that.
Stacey.
But being punished about that, and how this was all released as a distraction from the floor vote on HB 1675. And this is so telling because every single person on this call has gone through this. There's a quote on the back of my car, and I think it might be from Orwell. I can't remember, but it's society hates truth teller, or the farther society gets from the truth, the more it hates the truth tellers. And the tone policing and the discrediting as crazy, aka hysterical female, and the discrediting as conspiracy theorist, and all of these really kind of at their root misogynistic, especially for survivors as women, really right, is exactly how a power structure maintains its dominance and prevents any questioning. Don't listen to them. They're crazy. Don't look at the 150 pages of IRS documents that they provided to you. They're just crazy, hysterical females, is essentially the tone that came out of that. And that has been always with us, right? That is the textbook of how power structures maintain dominance, is to discredit. It's not to don't address the actual
They don't. Look what happened.
allegations, discredit the people who are making the allegations and excommunicate them.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going through with the Democratic Party, to come back to what Gracie was trying to direct me to, which is these wonderful progressive people who, and men in particular, who say that they are pro woman and pro survivor and pro truth and justice in the American way. And, let's do things right. Let's do things honestly, and are pointing their finger, rightly so, pointing their finger at Republicans when Republicans are protecting bad actors in their own party. And there's a lot of that going on, but no awareness of we're doing the same thing because we're all operating in the same power structure. We're all operating with it. All that matters is the team that we're on, not truth, not transparency, not doing the right thing. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've been attacked, as I think all of you have been attacked by the same Democrats who are supposed to be the ones that care about this stuff, have been attacked, and personally and generally. And I'm happy to talk about any of them in particular if you want.
Did you see what happened between me and David Muse?
No, I don't exist on social media for a reason.
Okay. So David Muse was putting out the coalition propaganda.
Who he is.
He's a state rep, David Muse of Portsmouth, and he is a Democrat and forward-thinking, liberal-minded. And he was putting out the coalition's propaganda. And when I confronted him about how he is basically calling us all liars without even acknowledging the data that we have, or even ask questions, or maybe even a Zoom call, hell, coffee, let's talk about it. He took their side without even looking at the evidence, without even talking to anybody.
Or talking to me. Yeah, I'm right there in front of him.
Thank you.
And this is true across the board. And this is another kind of rule of humanity, unfortunately, especially in politics, is people would much, much, much rather talk about you than to you. And that is exactly the thing you need to do to pass good legislation, is talk to people. But instead we operate in this, again, high school on steroids environment where it's all the keying and the click formations.
Well, and they block people on social media.
Right. They literally shut down discourse between people who are even on their own side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just come to me. And so many Democrats right now, I am actually not that hard to work with. You will not get my ire no matter how much you disagree with me, as long as you are operating in good faith. And most people, I think, know that. Most people think know that I will talk to whoever about whatever and go through the details and be really logical, and just don't be a bad faith actor. Listen to the information and try to work through it with me. If you're doing that, no problems. But also, most people at the State House know that I can be incredibly brutal or a bad faith actor, and I will tear you down right to your face. But
to your face, though.
That just proves that they're acting in bad faith, because if they were acting in good faith, they would come to me and talk to me.
Yeah. That leads me to something about HB 1675, which I think is very important, and about good faith or bad faith. So we here collectively all had our own different experiences, started by Ellen to bring this thing, and bringing the rest of us in with, the information that we had, our experiences, etc. That was good faith. There was nobody paying for it. It was pure grassroots.
Nobody took money from Claire. We're not receiving any money from XYZ.
Anybody, and Ellen isn't either.
I'm way too poor to pay you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, but the point is that when the committee, so the original bill, HB 1675, was introduced, and we all gave testimony, and 21 people gave testimony in favor of it. And then there was a committee meeting to introduce an amendment, changing it to a 91A right to know agreement. And then there was a vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
The committee voted 16-0 in favor of the amendment, and the committee voted 9-7 in favor of the bill as a whole.
10-6 initially, and this
Yeah,
proves
10
the
to
bad
6.
faith.
10 to
10
6.
to 6 with one Democrat voting for the underlying bill, and then they recessed. The Democrats beat up on that guy, and he had to come back to the table and flip his vote. They reconsidered it so he could flip his vote.
Ooh, who was
Yeah.
that? Was that Heath Howard?
No, Heath flipped on us very early. Heath was initially in favor. Jackie Grota was initially in favor because Margie Smith has been, Jackie Grota and Margie Smith have been, and I'm talking about reps right now, Democrats only. Jackie Grota, who's the ranking Democrat on that committee, is very close with Margie Smith, who has been in the State House for 30 years and has been in Judiciary, which is one of the four main committees that the coalition comes before on bills, with all of their $11,000 a year of lobbying. But Margie Smith has seen them in action for literally decades and is not a fan because she's seen them come and testify against over and over again things that would help victims and survivors. And at first, it's like a real head scratcher. It's like seeing Planned Parenthood show up and oppose, pro-choice legislation. And, maybe once or maybe twice, if they had like reason that they throw you, you're like, well, I guess if the experts go along with that, then I suppose they have a good reason, right? But we're talking about literally dozens of bills where they have no real justification. But if you sit there and you study where they get their money and how they get their money, it becomes really clear why they're taking those positions. And so we're talking about everything from victims having a right to evidentiary hearings in court to victims having a right to be notified of what their existing legal rights are, to victims having a right to file a protective order online instead of going through the coalition to do it. It runs the gamut. And Margie has seen them in action. And Margie has said to me, to Jackie, to Heath, in front of many people, that the coalition does not care, repeatedly. The coalition does not care about victims. It cares about its own money. And so Margie, Jackie, and Heath were all in favor of this initially.
Mhm.
And then the coalition started their pressure tactics. And it's so politically inexpedient for a Democrat to be seen opposing this organization that, of course, it's, mother's apple pie, right? Of course, I'm against
Yeah.
domestic and sexual violence. Of course,
would
who isn't?
be?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I, that's kind of why I had to put this in, because it had to come from not just a Democrat, but a far left Democrat that totally believes in funding. And it had to come from a survivor who cares about survivors. Nobody, and I've noticed that as much as they've attacked the rest of you, they've kind of left me a little buffer and not run at me personally online.
Mhm.
And I think it's because they can't make that argument. They can't make an argument that I'm trying to protect perpetrators or
They
that I'm
can't.
trying to defund services.
There were members of the City of Concord Council besides Amanda Grady Sexton who were also paid for Marsy's Law. And the Attorney General's office was complicit in setting up meetings in Concord City Council with Amanda Grady Sexton, with multiple public officials, district attorneys, the Attorney General's office, these lobby firms, the mayor. They were all there, and there was no notice to the public of these meetings. And if you look at the New Hampshire Municipal Association guidelines on what meetings have to be public or notified to the public, this falls very clearly under that guideline, and there was no notification. I think the first meeting was at the beginning of October 2017, and the bill was introduced in spring of 2018, and it was, and I think it's very alarming because, to me, knowing about that incident when this amendment was introduced and the fact that there were Marsy's Law lobbyists in the room and this conversation going on with city councillors in Concord and with the Attorney General's office makes me believe that, in fact, the whole opposition to HB 1675 wasn't in good faith, wasn't grassroots, and was all tied to Marcy's Law, which is backed by California billionaire.
Culinary. That's a great full of Freudian slip.
Felinaire is an amazing word.
Felinaire. I know. Felinaire. California Felinaire.
So, and I didn't know when you talked about Henry T. Nicholas a little while ago, I didn't know that detail about the feces smearing. I knew about the 5 felony drug trafficking. I knew about the ABC News article exposing both him and this other random billionaire, Jeffrey Epstein, and his 30 million, meaning Henry's $30 million underground sex layer. I knew about the battery case. I knew about
I didn't know about the feces either, but hey,
the security fraud case, but I didn't know, and I knew about the 430 mentions in the Epstein files, but I didn't know about the feces smearing on the girlfriend. But I just want it because I don't know if people listening necessarily know what Marcy's Law is. So that's the push that Henry T. Nicholas, this billionaire, this troubled felinaire, that is the push that he created to get this constitutional amendment across all these different states to change, basically attack the rights of the accused, which is sacrosanct in the federal constitution. And what he did in New Hampshire is he sent hundreds of thousands of dollars, essentially, to other people that you mentioned, AG, Concord City Council, but also sent it to the coalition, specifically their lobbyists, but because they cannot, and this is the big thing, they could not receive all of that money and then lobby because they would have broken the law. They would have violated their 501c3 tax exempt status because they would be way spending way more of their allowable funds, 5% of their private donations on lobbying. And instead,
let's talk about lobbying.
You're right. So they took these so let me back up. A 501c3 tax exempt 501c3 is a non-political tax exempt charity, and their tax exemption depends on them not at all doing any kind of what we call electioneering, which is donating to political candidates or parties or interfering. You can't put out anything saying we really like this candidate. You cannot interfere in elections at all. And you have to limit how much you lobby to 5% of your eligible funds. All of the federal funds that they get and all of the state funds they get are not eligible for lobbying. They only get about $200,000, depending on the year, in private donations. And so 5% of that is around $9,000 to $13,000 a year. That's all they get for lobbying. And with that money, despite the fact that the average lobbyist in New Hampshire gets about $80,000 a year, they are able to have 5 to 7 registered lobbyists, depending on the year. Now, some of these are not full-time lobbyists, but they're all registered lobbyists. They also have, by the way, and this is those 4 committees that they show up in, by their own website, they say they lobby on 150 bills a year on $11,000. Just this week, the 2 days we were in session, Amanda Grady Sexton was in the hallway all day long on both days. And then the dedicated lobbyist that they have, whose sole job is to lobby, Pamela Keeley, she was in the gallery watching us all day long on both session days. The first day was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. The second one was 9 a.m. to like 4 or 5. Now, please, and that's just 2 days. They are there any day that criminal justice, judiciary, child and family law, or health and human services committees meet, which is pretty much 2 to 3 days a week. And when they go and testify, they bring usually 2 people to testify at the table at the same time. And we have all the video evidence. We have all the bill file evidence of all of their lobbying. It's an obscene amount of lobbying. And the idea that they're doing this for $11,000 a year is not even, it's just laughable. But it goes further than that because even by some of their own reports, they're exceed. So you have their tax forms where they say, yes, we're totally obeying the 5%. And then you have the lobbyists who have to report how much they're being paid to the state. And even on some years, they're telling on their boss. They're admitting they're getting paid more. I can't hear you.
I think there's another issue here, though, that's even bigger than that. And that is that so in 2018, that's when we found the records of Marcy's Law and who was getting paid in the coalition and the Concord City Council, and then these various law firms and other lobby firms. One of those firms was called J. Grim Billis Strategic Solutions LLC.
And I'll put that up on the screen as well.
Yeah. And J. Grimbillas Solutions LLC in 2023 received two amounts of $6,000 each, so $12,000 in the first half of the year, which they then, and they state that they continued to receive money from the coalition for the other 2 quarters, but they didn't say how much it was. But in the first report that they did from the first $6,000, Grimbillas stated what they did with that money, and they gave amounts between $200 and $300 to individual political candidates running for the state senate, running for the executive council, and they were selective. Not everybody got them. And then they also gave $500 each to the New Hampshire committee to elect House Republicans and the New Hampshire Democratic Victory campaign, I think it's called. And
DVCC.
so, that right there is what looks, completely like what they call straw donations, which, the current White House administration actually sent a memo out last year about how dangerous these are, and they wanted to crack down on them because they are very strictly illegal. So you have the coalition, overspending on lobbying that they're not supposed to, getting involved in legislation, which they're not supposed to, and then you have them, making straw donations to select political candidates. It's unbelievable.
And it's not just the straw donation part. So straw donations are illegal. PACs, as far as I know, Grimbillis is not following any kind of PAC law on this and doing this, but PACs can donate on behalf of their donors, but they have to be very, very transparent about who's doing that. Grimbillis did say who they were donating, and that's the damning piece. They filed this to this required documentation to the Secretary of State. And just to be clear, we have lots and lots of lobbying firms who've received money from the coalition. And just like, let's put that in perspective for a second. The coalition can only spend $11,000 a year. They already have 5 of their own, and they're already exceeding their lobbying. So why are they spending $10,000 on this lobbying firm, $17,000 on that lobbying firm? But most of these lobbying firms, they file the required reporting, but they don't say what has been done with the money. They don't say if they lobbied. They don't say if they donated. They don't say if they were consultants. They don't say anything. But this one file that was filed, it seems like the person who filed it didn't get the memo to not say anything. And they were very transparent, because the addendum to this file for the coalition specifically said, yes, we are using this 501c3's money. They cannot electioneer to donate to all these Senate campaigns and to the House and Republican campaigns as well. And it seems like it's only the senators that supported Marcy's Law that got these donations.
Stacey, you look like you want to say something. Go ahead.
No, just lobbyists have to file these reports, and I believe it was Henry T. Nicholas who filed the report that he gave all this money, but then the lobbyist who received the most money. So we know who he paid. It was Amanda Grady Sexton, and she did not report that to.
Right, that's the other.
Yeah,
that's the whole other thing. So in general, they exceed their lobbying limits, right? But in 2018 in particular is what I was starting to say, is they received hundreds of thousands of dollars, they being the executives of the coalition. They received hundreds of thousands of dollars collectively, but they had to receive it as individuals, not as the coalition. Because if they had received it as the coalition, then they would have been spending something like 70% of their private donations on lobbying, which they wouldn't be allowed to do. So instead, they received it individually. That looks really gross, but like technically you could do that, right? However, they didn't register as lobbyists for Marcy's Law. All of the lobbying that happened under Marcy's Law happened as with their coalition emails, with their coalition titles, and they did not report the money they received when they reported under the coalition, and they didn't report anything under Marcy's Law. So they were essentially, in effect, lobbying as the coalition, and the coalition was very openly in support of Marsy's Law as officially, but they were lobbying, they were receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars and lobbying as the coalition in favor of Marsy's Law, which again takes us back to all of this violates their 501c3 tax exempt status. It implicates them in tax fraud and tax evasion for multiple years, likely every single year. And even if they don't face charges like the Florida and other coalitions have, it means that their 501c3 status is very, very much in jeopardy of being pulled back, and them being at a bare minimum owing all these past years of taxes that they should have been paying taxes. But very likely they would face charges, I think.
Well, and I think sorry. Oh, you go ahead, Stacey.
No, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say what makes me so angry. So I'm an elected representative and I take it very seriously. I represent the people. But what makes me so angry is Amanda Grady Sexton used council chambers where the city council meets, and that is not up for rent. You can't rent that space. I wanted to use it to teach a civics class to kids, and I was told, well, you got to kind of jump through all these hoops. You got to get permission from the council, from the mayor. And Amanda Grady Sexton used the council chambers to organize meetings for Marsy's Law with other lobbyists, and that makes me angry because she's profiting, and this is a municipal space. She wasn't using it for Concord, wasn't using it for the public safety board. In fact, I think that year that she didn't even attend a meeting for the safety board. She wasn't doing it for anything, for any benefit to Concord residents. It was for lining her own pocket.
Well, and on top of that, she had the gall to say that, for all Henry T. Nicholas's sex and drug and domestic violence issues and securities fraud background as well, that he was a victim. And it's
What?
like, and that,
What?
and that people shouldn't pay attention to the negative news stories about him. And meanwhile, on Monday night, when you had your council meeting, she wasn't present. She's in charge of the fiscal spending or something like that. That's
Or
when
she's on the fiscal policy advisory committee, and she has been for many years.
and there's this announcement that they did misspend money by quite a lot, and
Yep.
then she's not there, and then and then Stacey gets this letter of admonishment from the mayor the next day, which I believe was probably written by her because all the talking points in it seem to be coming from her. And so what did she do? She avoids Monday night's council meeting so she doesn't face scrutiny for misspending, and then makes sure that this letter gets out to the media, to make the focus on Tuesday morning about Stacey, agent of chaos, and not about, to avoid HB 1675. And you can see the tactics, and it's like, I have this saying that projection is everything.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
she should wear the baseball cap saying I project.
She
Every
actually called me a
accusation is a
liar.
confession.
Yeah, she called me a liar on social media, and I'm thinking, oh my
Wow.
God, I'm a survivor. I'm the very person that she's supposed to help, and because me and Claire were going to do a docuseries, a 10-part docuseries on New Hampshire corruption, not knowing that she was in the center of it, and I asked for help, God forbid.
Yeah, well, and I mean, she gets information wrong and then she spreads it to other people to spread. And I want to bring up this Damien Fisher character. So Damien Fisher is a freelance journalist who sometimes works for New Hampshire Journal, and he has written two hit pieces on me. He specifically let me and others know that he was writing
Didn't he call you a terrorist?
I don't,
Jihad.
maybe.
Jihad.
Jihad.
Jihad. He put a picture of me up with the jihad, saying I had a jihad against the coalition.
Oh, and then the filter was strange on your picture, Claire, because
Oh, yes.
they made sure that you looked darker.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this anyway, he's really attacked me. And he has failed to look at the records, which I pointed him to, which are publicly available to him, and has just absolutely failed. And he's got his information from Amanda Grady Sexton and from the coalition. So I reminded him and his boss, Michael Graham at Inside Sources and New Hampshire Journal, of Eremo versus Rolling Stone. So, what is that lawsuit? Well, basically, in 2014, Rolling Stone published an article called "A Rape on Campus" that was about an alleged rape on University of Virginia campus by a fraternity against this girl called Jackie. And another journalist from the Washington Post looked at this, basically saw that it was all, didn't hold up. And the Rolling Stone pulled the article, but and the editor of Rolling Stone had to resign. The journalist lost her job. And then Nicole Eremo, who was a dean of students who'd basically been smeared in the article, um, uh, brought this lawsuit, Eremo versus, and she was awarded $3 million in damage. And here's the kicker. The coalition got a woman called Laura Dunn, or Laura L. Dunn, to train Concord police and New Hampshire prosecutors in 2014 with a Violence Against Women Act grant. And if you look at Eremo versus Rolling Stone, who's behind it but Laura L. Dunn in
Oh,
Exhibit
it just goes.
15B? And it turns out that she helped place this article, and then she was all over the news promoting it as if it were true. And it turns out not only was it not true, but her own story wasn't true. And that she had been on National Public Radio in 2010 about her own alleged rape at the University of Wisconsin. And she had handed over these, official records, which NPR had failed to look at until 2015. When they looked at them in 2015, they corrected the program because she had completely misrepresented her own case. So you have a situation in New Hampshire where Laura L. Dunn has trained Concord police using funds that the coalition got from Violence Against Women Act. And they've used media and they've basically completely made a laughing stock of the entire judicial system because of this. And nobody in the Attorney General's office, no judges, no representatives except for Ellen will deal with this. But it's really serious.
It's such a disservice to actual survivors
It is.
because one of the things that they said when they were opposing my bill and how I ended up with their ire is that I put a bill in initially 3 years ago after my own assault, and I was denied a rape kit. And all it said was that if you go into a hospital and you declare that you've been sexually assaulted, the hospital has to give you like a little palm card, like patient bill of rights, your rights as a survivor. We have those in law already. And those rights include a right to an evidence kit, a rape kit. And they were so opposed to notifying victims of what their rights were. And I could not wrap my head around why at the time. It was so nonsensical. But when they showed up to the hearing, after having personally opposed me in conversations, they said that not all victims should have their evidence collected, and that they were worried that if they collected the evidence in certain cases, the evidence would be exculpatory and harm their case. And as a survivor, I am so incensed by that because I don't want to go after people who are innocent. I want to go after the guys who did this shit to me and did it to other people like me, right? I don't want to go after innocent guys. And when they hire people to drum up these narratives, these false narratives that we can prove are false, like Laura L. Dunn, who have been proven to be the actual false accusers, that victims like me are so sick of being accused of being liars and being attacked.
Thank you.
And they're the people who are supposed to help us are the ones that are doing the lying and making us look like liars. Yeah. That is so deeply offensive to me because I don't think any survivor that has actually gone through this wants to harm anyone except for the fucking assholes who did this to us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know each false accusation really harms a real person, and the coalition has exaggerated, falsified, things in the news media, which basically undermines victims' rights. It undermines integrity of the system, and that's the problem. And it's like we've all seen, it's been very clear, the lies that they've said about HB 1675, the lies that they've said about us in the media. And just think, if they're doing that about us on a bill, and we've also seen in criminal trials what they've done, how much of New Hampshire's justice system can we trust at all? Because they've got their hands around every element of it. And then they're feeding these, people that go to their crisis centers to their own lawyers who then sue and get, and are able to share the proceeds of their settlements from those suits with the coalition, because New Hampshire's statute allows nonprofits to share in the proceeds. So there is no justice. They keep talking about, transparency and this. There is no transparency. They're the one, their own lawyers are the ones who get in the way of blocking transparency.
So what does a normal person out there, like the audience who is just getting clued into what the coalition is and what they're doing and what they're not doing, what is the call to action?
I say, because they've had such a terrible social, and I say terrible as in just lying and not honest, not transparent social media game, like Stacey was talking about, with these 1,000 people that and by the way, going back to really fast to the lobbying, of those 1,000 people that they got to sign in opposition to the bill, a whole lot of them, as in hundreds of them, are actually employees. And what that means is that they were paid to actually interface with legislators, aka lobbying. And it means all of those employees who asked the legislature to not pass 1675 were lobbying despite not being registered by definition under the law. So this is just another element of their lobbying. But we need to counter their influence. And right now, the way they influence is on social media, these kind of attack tactics that they use against me, against all of you. And it means that people, especially if you've worked for them, if you've kind of come into contact with them professionally through a case, if you have been a victim and you were denied, like the vast majority of people who call their hotline every year, about 12,000 people call their hotline for help. These are not people who are calling just to chat. These are people who want assistance, legal assistance, shelter, something. And out of that, they only give about 275 to 500 rape kits a year. And they only give about 300 to 400 people shelter a year out of 12,000. And they only give legal assistance, meaningful legal assistance via lawyers, to high profile cases. Yep. Because criminal cases cost them money. Civil cases make them money. And so they will diminish actual people who need help if your assailant doesn't go to a high profile organization like Dartmouth.
Wow.
So we need everyone getting on social media and calling them out and not being scared, because they're going to try to retaliate, but you have backup. You have backup at the State House. You have backup in the Concord City Council. You have people who need your help, and we're not going to take them down alone. We can only do it together. Yep. So get on social media when they attack and push back and say, you know them, and this is what you experienced.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think that, the big message is that people who are worried about victims' privacy on this, they don't need to worry, because the state has statutes that are enshrined for victim privacy, and hospitals, police departments, the Attorney General's office all have to abide by right to know, and they do. And I personally have filed a lot of right to know requests with the Attorney General's office, which actually included correspondence between them and the coalition. And that's how I got wind of exactly what they were doing behind the scenes that I felt was extremely unethical. And that's we need to see the transcript. We're not asking to see victims. We're not even asking to see defendants. We're not asking victims or defendant stuff. We want transparency about what they're doing lobbying, who they're actually working for. Are they working for California Felinair? Who else is working for California Felinair? And how many bills, whether it's in the city of Concord or at the State House, are basically have these votes that are bad faith votes because there's all this California Felinair activity going on behind the scenes with the coalition, with the Attorney General's office, with members of City of Concord Council.
We need to make a t-shirt that says Felinair.
Can I just add that 91A, that's our New Hampshire right to know statute, that all of the government and all of the nonprofits, most of the nonprofits, I guess, since the coalition denies it, but essentially the nonprofits that contract for the government, All of them fall under 91A, which is our right to know statute. That was created in the 60s. If there was a flaw in this law by now, it would have been corrected. If we were, like you said, DCYF, who deals with victims, doesn't have to expose victims when they're 91A, right? DHHS, who goes and investigates families, doesn't deal with doesn't hand out information on these families under 91A. The DOJ that has, and the police who have confidential informants on active investigations, they don't turn over their confidential information on an active investigation just because you submitted a 91A, right? So we already have this in our New Hampshire hospitals, our mental health hospitals, they don't turn over patient information because of 91A. And so the idea that the coalition admits this information on victims is already legally protected. This was a Supreme Court law. It's legally protected information. 91A is not going to force them to hand over legally protected information. There's already an exemption. There's an entire chapter of exemptions to 91A because it's existed since the 60s to protect sensitive information from that disclosure. So it's absolutely insane, but I will be the first person, if the coalition themselves comes forward with an amendment to make sure that victim information is completely protected, I'll be the first one to put that in because I am a survivor and most of the people who've been helping me are survivors. We don't want to out any survivors.
Right.
We just want the services that we're paying through our tax dollars to go to survivors to actually go to the survivors and not to someone lobbying and buying their third home, for example.
Or spending money for victim services on personal security at the for Amanda Grady Sexton. I mean, they've had three, 30, what is it, $35 an hour, paid security details. It's like, it's absurd. So, as Stacey is known as an agent of chaos, and I'm known as a conspiracy theorist, I just want to point out that, and you're known as, goth. But Ellen here to me is known as Glinda the Good Witch. She's got the same color hair, she's got the same beautiful face, and I think everybody could get behind Glinda the Good Witch.
Has always been with you, my dear.